Yeah, I mean, this is sometimes the cultures where it's, if it was to come out, it wouldn't just be putting me and her at risk. It would also be like, you know, her sister would become divorced and like her father would lose their job, and like there would be huge ramifications that I can't even conceive of. But you have to be really mindful about it and what you're doing.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 66. We're Finn and Emma.
How about them dope jams?
I know, it was pretty dope.
Some fresh beats.
We, as you may have noticed, have new music this week, and it was sent actually to us from a listener from episode 54. Shout out to Mike.
He wasn't a listener. He was the person we interviewed. Why do I have my headphones
I don't know. It's bugging me, though. I can't concentrate because you have your headphones in.
I have no idea why. I'm not even listening to anything.
I know.
So anyway, thank you to Mike for sending that in. It was awesome. And we also just wanted to say that if you were also thinking about sending us music, you're still welcome to do so. We aren't monogamous in the music department. We're looking to mix it up a little.
Yeah, no, we're just looking to try out some new jams, I guess. And
beats, they're beats.
Beats, and see what sticks, I guess. So if you have an idea, definitely reach out, let us know. Today, this interview is with Claire.
Yep. Claire,
who is fascinating.
Yeah, she reached out to us via the email, which you can do as well via the website.
Yes.
normalizingnon-monogamy.com.
Okay.
Claire is a professional humanitarian aid worker who specializes in emergency response to natural disasters. She spends most of her time when she's not in England in Sub-Saharan or Eastern Africa, learning and exploring new languages and multiple polyamorous relationships.
Yeah, she's also an academic author and speaker and focuses on the intersections between ethics and aid.
We did not read any of this from her blurb that she sent us.
I was going to say, she did send us a blurb, but
we injected our own flair.
Yes. She is awesome, and we were super impressed by her ability to navigate a polyamorous relationship style while also traveling so much and learning all of these new languages.
I also just want to say, all the people who say communicating in a polyamorous relationship is so difficult, I'm not mocking you, but I'm just saying she does it in languages that you didn't even know existed until you listened to this.
Yep.
So, no more calling the wambulance.
It's pretty impressive.
So anyway, enough of that. Thank you to her. We're excited to share the interview in a hot second. Before we do, we have a couple of trips to take. Where are we going, Emma? What did we win today?
This coming weekend, we're going to Atlanta Poly Weekend in June 7th and 9th, and we're super excited about that. We've been talking about it for a while now. And
mainly excited because there's a pool party with pizza.
Yes, that's true. And we have free giveaways.
Yeah, we got tons of condoms from One Condoms. We'll talk about them in a hot second. I said hot second twice in this. I got to mix it up.
You do got to mix it up. But one of the other people that will be there this weekend reached out to us.
Yeah, they're a speaker, and they actually came on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, we interviewed them last week.
We interviewed them last week, and they had some time-specific information that we needed to share with everybody. So stick around to the end of this one, and we put that information there for you from them.
Yes, and their name is Co-Creation. Just in case you're curious, check them out.
Now, we're also heading west on the Oregon Trail.
That's true. Are we going to really take the actual Oregon Trail out there?
I'm hoping we don't have to ford any rivers or die of dysentery.
Let's hope not.
I hope our ox doesn't die. Anyway, tell them why we're going out on the Oregon Trail.
from June 25th to July 1st, we will be in Portland, Oregon, and we will be attending the World Domination Summit, which we're super excited about. It is not non-monogamy related. However, it is a super badass conference, and if you're interested in going or just in the area, we wanted to let everyone know that we will be there.
Yeah, a quick reading from their website, one sentence, bear with me, says, as adventurers from all walks of life, our mission is to create a remarkable community that helps each person pursue their own dreams.
Yes.
So we're going to pursue our own dreams.
Exactly. It's a series of meetups and networking and talks and just lots of awesome goodness.
Yeah, the conference, for anybody who's never heard of it, was organized originally about 9 years ago by a gentleman named Chris Guillebeau. He's an Arthur. He's actually a Chris, not an Arthur.
Yeah.
He's an author of books such as The Art of Nonconformity, The Happiness of Pursuit, Born for This, and a few others. He's traveled to every country on the planet. So he's a pretty amazing guy himself. Put together this amazing group of people. So if you happen to be in the area, let us know.
Yeah.
We will be there all week.
We can't wait. We have exciting conferences this month.
Yep. June is the month of conferences. Okay. One other thing that happened at the end of our interview with Claire, she was like, blah, 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 here's some stuff. And then it happened to be some really cool information about One Condoms.
Yeah.
Which, if you want to get 10% off, you can use the offer code Emma at checkout to get 10% off both my one and One Condoms.
But first, listen to this.
Yeah, what happened, Claire?
I heard about One Condoms from you guys, and I mentioned it to my partner. They checked it out. He is fucking hung.
Yeah, you said fucking hung. That's what you said.
He's fucking hung, and he has had issues busting through condoms that were normal before, these standard box, standard store-bought condoms. So moved on to One Condoms, and no broken rubbers and no pregnancies and no scares and just happy, protected sex. So thank you.
Yay!
Hey,
and hopefully a lot more comfortable.
Yes, I can imagine, especially now everything fits.
Yes.
Perfect. And so just really quick to follow up on what Claire said, you don't have to be fucking hung to use my One Condom.
True.
But they do work everywhere from not very fucking hung to very fucking hung.
Yeah.
So
there's over 60 sizes.
They're actually, I looked it up since the last time we did this.
We weren't sure.
There is exactly 60.
Okay.
So
Good.
We were both wrong the first time we recorded this.
I thought 66, Finn thought 62.
So anyway, there's 60 different sizes, and we're actually getting some really cool 3D models of some of the different sizes sent to us. So we'll be able to post some pictures and have an actual model of why would you ever need different condoms? The ones at the store fit me just fine. We'll have more information on that later. Let's go to oh no.
You can find the links to my One Condoms on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com or nnmpodcast.com under the resources page. You can also contact us there. We love to hear from any of you. Leave us a voicemail or write us an email, please. Thanks. That's it. Now on to Claire.
Welcome, Claire, to Normalizing Non-Monogamy. We've been trying to make this one happen for a little while as well, as always, because we were traveling. So thanks for your patience. And
no worries. Thank you.
Yeah, you're a seasoned world traveler yourself. So maybe for anyone, including ourselves, who doesn't know too much about you, can you maybe give a little background on why you reached out and what you're doing here?
Yeah, sure. So I identify as solo poly. I know you get a lot of couples on there because I've been listening for a long time. But I'm solo poly, and I kind of relationship anarchy. Those are kind of the labels that I use, I guess. I work in my day job, if you like, because I organize emergency response programs for natural disasters. So I travel around quite a lot, which means that I have a very eclectic dating background, which I think is interesting. And recently I was given a new label by a friend of mine, which I had not heard before. It probably formed on a subreddit somewhere, which was a pollinator.
Yeah.
And,
which is, for anybody who doesn't know, how do you define pollinator?
I think I would define it as somebody who regularly comes in contact with others, forms a relationship which might be sexually intimate or not. And in that dynamic, you are the first experience that person has had of anything outside the mononormative culture. So I got given that by a friend, not someone I was like dating. And I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me, and I thought it was very interesting. So I'm now writing a research paper on that and started a podcast off the back of that. And I think it's an interesting idea. So we're going to see where it goes in my research, but I don't know if you guys have had a pollinator on before, so I thought I would reach out and say hi.
Hello. Well, yeah. I don't know that we've had one who identifies as it, but I think it's finally fun to have one. So, well, did you want to plug the name of your podcast in the, or do you want to wait on that for now, or is it up and running at the moment?
We have the 3 taster episodes out. And then we are working on, we finished like the full part 1. We are basically let's plug it now. So it's Poly Pages podcast. And what I do is I collect other academics who are non-monogamous, and we read the kind of core texts that polyamorous and non-monogamous people kind of are assumed to have read. So like I've been polyamorous my entire life, and I've never read these texts, so I was interested to finally kind of read them and see if they were, I've been telling people there's this book if you want to read it for so long, but I actually hadn't sat down and read it. So now we do a week by week like closed reading of, at the moment it's The Ethical Slut, and then we have like obviously a whole canon of literature that people can use to get familiar with non-monogamy. So I'm kind of just trying to bring some of the academics to the table. We have some bonus episodes in the works where we read actual academic articles, so it's a little bit more super scientific. But generally we like to keep it pretty light, and it's just kind of me and my partners and friends like talking about what we think about what these people have already written.
Very cool. So it's sort of like a book club. Yeah,
it is. It's kind of like a book club with extra resources in it. So the other thing is like these books get published, and then within a year there's new resources out.
Yep.
So it's nice to read through them and say like, oh well, this podcast talks about this, and this article has actually addressed this, and if you want to know more about this, go here. So we try and keep it like fresh.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we'll make sure to put links for that in there.
Yeah. So taking, I guess, a step back, you said you've been polyamorous your whole life. When did you first know that, and how did you discover that about yourself?
And also, do you mind giving people just a little bit of an idea of who they're listening to? I mean, yes. We can see you, we have a bit of an idea, but for anyone who can't see you, which is everyone.
This being a podcast. Well, I'm 29, I'm female. I use she, her pronouns. Outside of the work and the poly stuff, I'm a rescue scuba diver, and I spend a lot of time learning new languages. To be honest with you, the permanent stuff that I do all tends to come back to like my work. So like run another podcast which is about work, but we don't have to plug that because it's not relevant. And yeah, as I said, like I've been polyamorous for like, well, I used to think I started practicing polyamory when I started working in this sector, because it's a sector that has a lot of instability and a lot of distance, but also tends to attract people that I think probably have the soft skills that makes non-monogamy not easy, but like a more likely relationship dynamic to occur. But then I was listening to your episode with Tristan in it, and she spoke about her origin story. And so I kept going like back and back and back. And I was like, oh no, this has always been there. I just didn't have a language for it until I kind of started operating with multiple partners over, like in a more formal way. Like even before I had like any idea what sex was, I was imagining like multiple partners could like, I don't know, come to dinner, or like it would not be strange if there was several people around me to like give me comfort. And I think even from a young age, I was never worried about making that a potential option in my relationships. Mm-hmm. So like when I was 16, it was my first boyfriend, and but my first person I was dating that had a penis, so to be as inclusive as possible. And the inevitable discussion of like sex came up. And I had sex before with people with a vulva, but I hadn't had sex with anyone with a penis. And I said, like, well, I don't really want to do that. And I was 16, so it's quite young, here at least. And he was like, well, if I don't have sex, I think I might cheat on you. Which I now realize is a really horrible thing to say. And obviously, if you're listening to this and you're that young and someone says that, then just dump him. But my immediate response was like, well, I think if that's something you want to do, then you should just go and do it. And now I think about that as kind of like a strange response. So maybe even back then I was thinking like, if this is something you want and need to do with somebody else, then just go and do it with someone else. Like, why is this even a discussion?
So you had sex with essentially another woman, and then you were dating a guy and decided that you didn't want to include the sex into that relationship. And for you, it was totally fine to just say, okay, well, for me, go ahead and find that if that's what you need to go find.
Essentially, I mean, he didn't, because I imagine this was not the reaction he was expecting. He just sort of sheepishly was like, oh, okay, then I guess I'll wait. But, it was for me, I don't think it was even like a particularly emotional moment. I was like, cool, you should do that. That sounds fun for you. Like, I don't have an interest in it, so you should do that.
Right. So how do you identify at this point, just out of curiosity?
Pansexual.
Okay.
Kind of, as I said, I have a very eclectic dating history in terms of cultural backgrounds as well as gendered backgrounds. I know some people use bisexual, but for me, I don't like anything that. It's completely okay. Somebody wants to identify as bisexual, really doesn't matter. I think it's just semantics at that point. But for me, it still has a connotation with like a bi-gendered focus, which I don't feel comfortable with given my dating history. So I usually use pansexual, and I'm very like open about that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, thank you.
So I guess you've known this from an early age. Have you? Or I guess even though you didn't have the words for it, how did you find the words for it? And when did you realize, I guess, that, oh, this is a lifestyle and this is a way people identify? How did you discover that?
Well, I think it's, so when I'm now really literate on like all the literature, the bodies of like texts that are there, the sort of poly community, but I don't like that's definitely a recent thing, only since I've been engaged in it in like a academic sense. So I think I basically just kind of started doing the thing that made most sense to me at the time. So as I said, I started working very internationally, and it just became more and more difficult to conceive of a relationship that would be able to withstand the kind of challenges and the impacts that you come across in this field, like this line of work. And I was constantly surrounded by people who weren't monogamous. It was just assumed that at some point you've had a discussion with your partner, because you're going to go to like a war zone for 6 weeks and have no contact with them. There's probably been a discussion about what that would mean for your relationship. And I just began to assume that was a normal discussion that you could and should have with your partner. So it came about in a very natural way. But then I realized that there was this body of literature there. And even though when I'm reading it, I feel like it's a bit homogenous, it can still be very helpful to have some of that language.
Yeah. Well, I guess, it makes me curious. So it almost seems like your line of work, it really fit with sort of what you discovered about yourself back at age 16. And then it was you found yourself in a situation over and over again where it seems like the people in that field were sort of almost non-monogamous out of necessity in a sense. And I guess maybe that's not to paint everybody in the international humanitarian field as polyamorous or relationship anarchists, but I can imagine it does happen. I mean, almost as maybe out of a coping mechanism and out of you're in these situations and you're bonding together, and
they're not easy situations.
Exactly. I guess, can you speak on that a little more about how you sort of, the realizations that kind of started to happen as you started to see this happening more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can't speak for everyone, and no one would want me to. We're all very opinionated. I'm sure they would hate that. But it's so what happened for me was that starting this career was kind of a turning point for everything. It meant that I no longer needed even to own more than a bag's worth of clothing. It really was like a turning point. Now I look back on so many things. When I actually started in the field, I was in a monogamous relationship. And within about 3 months, we realized this was a huge dynamic change for us. And we had a very productive conversation, which in the end we decided to dissolve the relationship. It was super amicable. But after that, I was like, I'm going to put this out there every time. I'm coming to stay there for, let's go to a country for 6 months. I'm not going to promise to stay there afterwards. No one's going to expect me to stay there afterwards. And the people around me tend to be incredibly emotionally literate people who can understand compartmentalization incredibly well. That is, I would say, a necessity for the field that I work in. It's just incredibly emotionally difficult if you're not like that. So I end up being around people that are like, oh, cool, you can do that. It's not unusual. It's not strange. So you have the soft skills, as I said, that are made it more of an option.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I had decided that this was something that I wanted to prioritize for myself and had in my mind where I want to be. And that's not necessarily linked with somebody else. So,
yeah. And so moving forward and where you are today, you don't really have a primary partner where you see I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this person, and there may be other people who come and go. I think, right, so that's one type of polyamory that we've interviewed people who do that. They have their primary partner, and then they'll have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and then they kind of always have this one constant in their life, but that's not really how you approach it.
No, I mean, there's definitely so much value in having consistent relationships and long-term relationships. And I do manage to cultivate them, because I think there's something really specific that you can only really get to if you're with someone for a long time, meeting the parents or sharing space and stuff like that. It's not going to happen right off the bat. It'd be kind of strange, I think, if it happened right off the bat. Nothing wrong with it if it does,
right.
But that's never been my experience. So what tends to happen is if I'm in a country for more than a few months or something, I'll end up having relationships while I'm there. And then usually that kind of becomes one relationship because the person is uncomfortable or making a transition towards seeing things from my perspective. That's the pollination, if you like, period.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it ends up taking on legs, I'm not just going to abandon the whole polycule that I formed.
Sure.
So over the years, what's ended up happening is I have just naturally discovered I have a little polycule here and a little polycule here, and they're very geographically separated. But that's quite nice. It's almost I can have nesting partners that I've managed to maintain over long distance, and obviously so much that relies on the people that I'm dating and the way that we get to the point whether they can go yeah, I want to do this, or no, this isn't for me, it's too much of a change from what I'm used to. So at the moment it feels very much like I have these great nesting partners that are or almost nesting partners. I don't particularly like that phrase, but I can't think of anything more better, because it really is I fly in there and I'm there, and I go somewhere else and I'm there. And that feels really nice, because it does feel like I'm getting the support I need to do that. I think at this point I'm working more towards having a slightly more stabilized regime, so I'm not necessarily so global all the time. And I've been speaking to my partners about what that transition would look like. It's three, I would say three, that I've had that discussion with and seriously thought about where that would lead. We're in that phase now, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. To think about that, when you show up in certain cities around the world, that you sort of have you're almost like a little family there, and then you go and you have a little family here. And I think that's really
Oh, yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's amazing, yeah. And it allows you to have connections and familiarity while traveling, too, because that's something that we're very familiar with, I guess, is that as you're traveling, it can be very isolating, even though you're meeting people along the way, and it's not always easy. So having somebody that's familiar, that when you get that place, you know that, and it's comforting, right?
Yeah. And also it's quite nice to have an insight into like that person's life in a very deep way.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as I said, I think that gets missed if you're rapidly changing partners. I think that can be lost somewhat. And also these partners come from vastly different backgrounds, so it's like the cross-cultural relationships that I've had, I find are always super valuable for both and all of the people involved. But obviously it does make the communication of such a strange, quote-unquote strange idea as polyamory can make that a little bit difficult, but I've always managed to find a script that works.
Well, because have you had those conversations in languages other than your native language, which is your native language is English, correct?
Yeah.
Which I would imagine would be hard. It would be hard.
Yeah, it's so hard because a lot of the literal language, like the literal words, like compersion, for example, it's such a new word.
Yeah.
It does not translate necessarily into, Bantu or Swahili or something.
Right.
So you're more describing concepts and trying to use a familiar set of rules and scenarios that would be best for that person to understand what I want and need, and also for that person to then describe to me, like, oh, I don't want that.
Right.
Like I was stationed in Madagascar for a while, and I was not very good at French at the time, and I was dating a Malagasy man. So I was learning Malagasy, and he didn't speak French very well. So we were both kind of just using like a language that neither of us really knew, and eventually we got to a point where I could kind of speak the language well enough he wouldn't have to use his French anymore because it was so bad. And I remember a friend of mine was like, how are you having conversations of any like important topic when you are so fresh to the language? And I thought that was really interesting. And when I thought about it, it was like, actually, this means I really have to strip out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just have to say, like, this makes me sad. Right. There we go. That's the beginning of the discussion, right? Well, this makes me happy. And it really it was a really interesting experience to have those discussions that would usually, I think, be incredibly emotional in a language that was so new to me that I couldn't express my emotion. I could only express what I wanted and needed.
Right.
Because it's literally the verbs that I knew.
Right.
Like, I think too, and I'm fascinated by that and curious about it, where you're able to. So there's many people who can't even fathom having multiple relationships in their own native language. Like, so to think about a whole bunch of English speakers trying to navigate polyamory is not an easy thing to do, and now you're doing it in multiple languages, and also not even navigating the polyamory side, but you're also developing a relationship with somebody without even necessarily speaking the same language. And I think that's sort of a mind-blowing thing for someone to imagine as well. As like you said, you were dating this guy and developing deeper and deeper feelings when you could barely even communicate with each other verbally. And I guess
it's also, though, the quickest way of learning a language is to flirt with somebody. I mean, by the end of the time I was in Madagascar, I was like practically fluent, so like that was fine. But it's definitely like, I could be really cheesy and be like, the only language you need is love. But that's not true. Like, you need to be able to like talk about boundaries and sexual health and family and whatever is important in the context that I'm working in.
Yeah. And I guess, can you talk a little bit about how you managed to do that as you were picking up the language before you necessarily had those verbal skills? Like, how you were able to navigate those things?
Probably body language. I mean, it's like 50% of probably more than even what we're saying.
Sure.
To people that are.
Yeah.
Like speaking the same language as. I mean, often there's been some kind of like like their second language might be my second language or something, which has smoothed some of the edges. So I end up often mixing my languages together. Weirdly. That's actually more probably because I just haven't got a firm enough grip on anything to be completely fluent. So I'm like, throw in a French word, it'd be fine. I don't know. But yeah, I think body language is important, but obviously these are things that require you to sit down and like be super patient about. I mean, like these are not quick conversations that you can have, like, I don't know, on the ride home from Burning Man or whatever, right? Like this is like, I'm having to come to the table, and like we might even need to have someone else there because of like the cultural, because of, I don't know, a language barrier, which would be helped by having your friend there. But then, do you want to have your friend there? And
yeah, well, I think you also just touched on something that I was curious about too, which is, I imagine you've come up against places where what your relationship style is not culturally accepted, and is that something you've had to navigate around, and how have you done that?
Well, you're also a foreigner coming into these places too. That can sometimes you can be judged for not being from locally.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit on like it's massively difficult. I mean, you could have a whole podcast just on that. Yeah, essentially, when you're a guest in like another country, and you're an expatriate, and you're there. I'm there to work, right? I'm not there to like enjoy the beach and like meet fun people, right? That's just something that I know that I need in order to do the work that I do. There are plenty of expats that also like are completely like celibate or like abstain completely from any kind of intimate relationships. There are plenty of expats who will explicitly say like, I don't want to date cross-culturally. And there are other ways that you can navigate this. It's just that I know that my time will be more rewarding, and I will actually be a better like balanced person, and therefore my work will be better. If I am, also my language will be better, I guess, as well, if I am having these relationships. So I'm not saying this is like, something that everyone does in my field. But I have come across some places where it would be incredibly taboo to have more than one partner. That happens quite a lot, but even then, as you say, like I'm a foreigner. So actually, it's like I sometimes get more leeway.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't know how we do things here. Like, she doesn't have to come to church in the family bride. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
She's different. And I think I would be really stupid to, like, imagine that doesn't make a difference when it clearly does. Usually if I'm practically, if I'm coming up across to somebody and we're beginning to date and we're beginning to form an interest in each other, I will be pretty upfront about it. And then we can talk about how we want to manage that. So if it's safe for me to do so, I'll be upfront about it. And then that person can either buy in, and then we can have a chat. Okay, so how do we need to do this in your village versus how we need to do it in the capital versus what do we do when I'm not there? And I think usually that conversation makes them feel like they're on board because they are. But also, I will pretty much take what they say as golden. Like, if they're saying, no, you need to be monogamous with me in the country, then that's our starting point because they know the culture better than me. They know what's safe. That's usually what, I've also been in those places where people have had kind of like less issues with it than I would have expected. So Madagascar was one where it was like, yeah, right. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. It was like, it didn't need to be as difficult as I thought it was going to be.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's something too that maybe is misconstrued a little bit, is that, all of these other countries are much more uptight about stuff like that. And I think that's something we've been learning a little bit about some books we've been reading where they were talking about some different locations in Africa where they're very nomadic, and like the men will take turns going off for weeks at a time to hunt or to live in like with the animals and do animal husbandry. And it's sort of just known that while they're gone, life goes on at home, and they just it's just a very natural thing. They don't have to name it. That's just how they live it. So I think it's fascinating to hear someone who's coming into it from the outside and almost participating in it in a sense. Not that you were at that specific location. I wasn't trying to imply that much.
I'm out there with the animal husbandry.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's like really interesting that like now that I am reading literature, I'm like, there seems to be this huge gap. Like it just seems to be about like Americans that are white and have a certain amount of privilege, like overwhelmingly, which is strange to me as someone that is coming into literature like quite late, having already done it, but also someone that's not from America, because I would have thought that the worst place to try and do this is like Bible Belt America. But obviously, I've been listening to your episodes, and I know those people who are poly and they live in the Bible Belt. I'm like, that must be so hard. It must be so difficult. And then they'll be like, well, you know, you were doing it in Tanzania. How are you doing that? And I'm like, it didn't seem that hard, actually. And I think it is just that, like, it's, as I said, like, the body of literature and the community tends to be so homogenous. It has the same flags that everyone can kind of grasp and be like, oh, okay, you went to a singing party, or, you know, you sat down and spoke with a counselor, or you went to Burning Man, or, like, these flags that are in that body of literature to help people navigate it. But I've been doing fine without it.
Right.
And clearly there's like a whole bunch of other people that, you know, even in the Black and poly community, it's very specifically about Americans, very specifically Black Americans, because so much about, I mean, you guys did a great episode on it with Crystal, so I don't need to reiterate it. But it's like, there is a lot more, like cultural scripts that can work. It's just finding the one that's culturally appropriate and like context specific, I think.
Yeah. Do you almost feel like you were doing it just fine without having to dig into all the literature, and you almost feel like why did I bother trying to learn all of the things that other people are saying about it when I seemed to be doing it just fine, and I was doing it my own way?
No, not entirely. I think that it's kind of been quite timely because, as I said, I'm trying to move my career into like a more of a stabilized place, and also my life. So now that I'm having discussions with partners about nesting, and also so there's that element, like for myself, now there is like tools and stuff that I was like, oh, I can now use these because I'm having conversations differently anyway. But also, as I said, like, I pollinate people all the time. Now I can just be like, oh, I know that this is good. Like, oh, I know how this has been explained previously. I know how to, like, deconstruct the difference between monogamy and non-monogamy and be like, well, you have a friend that you spend all your time with. Isn't that kind of like a relationship? I'm like, oh, that's really helpful. There are elements of it that are, like, that I'm not really using. Like, for example, a lot of the literature puts polyamorous as sort of part of the queer umbrella. I've never come across that really until pretty recently. There's never been a case of like, well, you're bi-curious, maybe we should try this or that, because it's just not something that would be even less likely to happen in some cultures, I think, that I've been dating in. So some of it's been super helpful. Some of it's just reinforced what I already knew. And some of it, yeah, I don't use, but it's super interesting. So,
Yeah. Where do you see yourself moving in the future? Do you see staying in a similar type relationship style? I know you said that you're trying to move toward a more stable, I guess.
But that's work-wise.
Right, work-wise. But do you see your relationship styles shifting at all?
I think so. The kind of downside of my work is that it involves a lot of personal trauma. So there's been a couple instances of like accidents and instances in the field. And that's kind of prompted me to be like, actually, I'd like to have a bit more of a stable everything. So I'm having discussions with probably like 2 partners. I mean, I'm still dating both, like all people individually are like still dating. So, I mean, it started out with more partners I was having this discussion with. But as you start having this discussion, you realize like, okay, that's not where you're at. That's fine. We'll just keep dating, or we'll just transition this into a friendship place or whatever. But I'd say there's like a couple of partners that I'm speaking to and actively looking at relocation, expenses and places. Both of which weren't poly before they met me. In fact, my polyamorous thing. I'm clearly not that bad at it. And they're both now sort of operating their own little like polycules and their own ways of doing things, which is really nice. I don't want to like infringe on that, and obviously anything that I want to do in terms of I don't want to say escalating because I don't like the relationship escalator, but kind of escalating, I guess, towards a more traditionally stable place. All of that relies on them as well, so I can only really say what I'm going to do, and that's I'm going to make my career in a more like safe and secure location.
Yeah.
Hopefully my relationships will fall in line, but if not, then I'll make new relationships and they'll be great and it'll be fun.
Yeah, I think like overall, I feel like the theme is like just how flexible you are about it all, and I think that's really admirable. That it's like if you go to a new location, you can make something happen there or not, and when you come back, it either continues or it doesn't, and you let it be what it is. And I think that's something that's really hard for people to just allow things to be what they are.
Well, I think it takes, you're obviously a very self-confident person and really, work through what you want for your life. And a lot of people struggle with that too, I think. So it's hard for people to wrap their minds around it.
Yeah. And also I think being fluid with like the relationships is super difficult. So like, as I said, like I have had some conversations about this with partners, and then we've had to basically be like, they've been like, oh, that's not what I want. And I've been like, okay, no worries. And transitioned that out of one space and into another space and redefine things. And I think that's a skill that we don't get to practice very often unless you're doing it like really hyper regularly with like friends, co-workers, partners, and that's basically what I do because I have to renegotiate even just like colleagues to boss back to consultant, entirely non-sexual obviously. So I think it's that skill is what's enabling me to do that, and it's a really hard one to practice essentially. I think that's the only reason why it was working out for me so well, because I can just I don't want to like kind of toot my own horn, but I am pretty good at doing that. So
and sort of compartmentalizing the different aspects.
Yeah, definitely. And then making sure that other people are kind of on board with where they're going to end up in that movement and understand it. And obviously, like not every decoupling, as it were, goes well, but most of them have been like I don't think there's many I can say like we never speak anymore and it was a waste of my time. Like I just would never think. I would hope that would never be an outcome of any decoupling for anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you found anything in your experience that has helped make those decoupling transitions smoother? Trying to prevent the catastrophic blow up at the end of a relationship, like things that you found you can do to help make that transition smoother and not cause, ill will towards each other.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think people respond very well to being like shame-free. So if there's no outcome that feels like hugely like it's going to reflect badly on them, then people tend to be better at voicing what they want. I mean, I guess it's the same if you're speaking about like a sexual act, right? If you make it shame-free, then you make it so that your partner can ask whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they will, and then you can say yes or no, right? It's obviously not always that simple, but like in an ideal way. When you think about decoupling, I guess it's kind of the same. Like we've already deconstructed the idea that if this breaks off, like it's like a divorce or something. It's very formal because we don't have those kinds of formalized structures in place. And also a lot of the time there is already the assumption that I will leave physically. So between those two things, making sure the person feels that they can say what they want to say and me inevitably physically leaving a place for at least some period of time, I think that makes it really a lot easier on all parties.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I was curious. Yeah, Are you out to family and friends? I mean, we see the dog on the couch, so presumably he knows that you're polyamorous. But other than that, are you out in your life to people?
Yes, I'm fully out. Obviously, when I'm going into a new mission, there's a period of time where I am low-key. Like, I'm not even out socializing. I'm just observing. A good briefing should always include things like personal relationship protocol that's both allowed by HR and also suggested for the environment. So they should tell me whether it would be like super bad for me to come out queer, for example, and I'll like tailor what I'm doing to that. But in like the stable aspects of my life, I'm out to my family, all my friends. The podcast uses my real name. I publish under my real name. I've met my partner's families as one of several potential partners. I'm not saying everyone gets it. Obviously, there are people that don't really understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But besides not necessarily getting it, has it been fairly positive? I mean, you haven't had any major pushback?
No, I've been really lucky. Like my family, for example, they knew that I was queer, and I think this is just like an addition to them. Mm-hmm. They knew that I was pansexual because they'd met female and trans people that I was dating. So they knew that, and then it's just like, oh, but also I'm going to be dating multiple people, and you are going to be meeting multiple people. And even if you're not meeting them, you still have to contact them in case I get injured in the field, for example. So they had literally like a formalized list of the people that would need to be contacted in that situation. Mm-hmm. And any negativity has just been like, oh, I don't understand this, and just kind of like battered it away. There needs to be no follow-up. There hasn't been any issues at all like that. And my friends, some of them have pollinated as well. I mean, they're just not loads of them, but definitely some of them have been like, that's actually really interesting. I want to explore that, and have gone off and made their own polycules and began to actively be poly as well. I think like probably some of the partners' families may have struggled with it, but again, that's also could be partially a cultural thing in some situations, but also kind of like not my problem that much because it's not my family. Like, I'm dating a person. Mm-hmm. It's kind of their responsibility, I see it, to make sure that we're out at a level that they're comfortable with their family.
Right.
Yeah. But I do realise that is a huge privilege. Like, there have been places where that's been like a minor miracle that it's been like that. And there has had to be some relationships that I've had, unfortunately, which have had to be completely secret, because even though I'm out, that doesn't mean that it's safe for the other person to be out.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely something you have to navigate, especially dating cross-culturally.
Yeah, I mean, this is sometimes the cultures where if it was to come out, it wouldn't just be putting me and her at risk. It would also be like, her sister would become divorced, and like her father would lose their job, and like there would be huge ramifications that I can't even conceive of. But you have to be really mindful about it and what you're doing.
Because of the polyamory, or just because they were dating or in a relationship with a foreigner?
No, that's only been with the queer situation.
Okay. I gotcha.
Weirdly, it's like the poly stuff doesn't seem to be as potentially damaging to anyone as the queer stuff has been. So all my queer relationships overseas have been super low-key.
Yeah.
Because it's literally illegal. So.
Right, out of necessity.
Right.
Yeah.
I was curious, how have you handled safety, sexual health?
And physical safety.
Physical safety, like. Yeah, in these while you're dating and traveling.
The issue with sexual health that I've come across is that it's perceived like very differently everywhere I am. And to have an actual conversation about safe sex, there needs to be, I think, three things. There needs to be a level of trust, because it's always going to come down to a level of trust, even if you're in a monogamous relationship, right? And even if you're married or whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to come down to a level of trust. there's also going to be a level of like egalitarian honesty, like the assumption that you can sit down with your partner and talk to them on a level, and there has to be an access to whatever contraception or sexual health that you're going to be using. And the reality is, like, those three things are, like, there are certain socio and economic, like, weight behind those things. Like, not everyone has access to contraception, and definitely not everyone has access to contraceptive education. So often I'm having to fall sometimes into the position of, like, also educating my partner about things like condoms and STIs and physically going to get tested with them. In my ideal world, that's what I would do. I would, like, test with my partner, physically being there with them, make sure they understand everything. 3 months later, test again, and then begin to negotiate a difference in contraceptive use. But that's just realistically, that's a huge activity to, like, engage with someone on that. On that topic. Is much easier, I think, to just be like, either we're not going to be having sexual relations, or you're going to be using this, and I get to decide that. And I get tested like, super regularly. I get tested like every 3 months, and I'm, like, very upfront about it with my partners. So that would be, like, the foundation for everyone that I'm dating. Once I'm with a partner, and they are, like, long-term, so the partners that I've been speaking to about becoming a bit more serious. I don't like using that word serious, but becoming a bit more traditionally escalated. Yes. So then the partners that I'm having maybe, like, longer-term goals with, shared assets, shared plans, we've kind of moved out of, I guess, the conventional dating stage and into, like, are you going to be my nesting partner? stage. Then it's a case of, like, negotiating out barriers completely. It's not fun without, as we all know, I'm sure. And they just have to make sure that they're also getting tested regularly and that they are only really using condoms with me. It's like a very soft fluid bonding at that point, I think.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think it's one of the first times we've really had the opportunity to talk to somebody who's had to navigate this culturally,
and
language-wise, and just so many aspects that it makes, the heteronormative poly navigation in, like, the U.S. seem pretty mundane. So.
Yeah. I mean, I have been dating a little bit in the US, just, like, literally within the last year. And it was like, this person is not even, like, questioning whether they should get out a condom. And, like, they have their, like, on their phone, they have their test results. And I'm just like, this is amazing. Is this how the rest of the world is all the time? Yes, it is. And here I am, like, struggling to explain some things to people that just really don't want to have a conversation. Like, it just feels super uncomfortable, and, like, it feels a bit like forced. But there's also been great relationships I've had absolutely no sexual contact. So I don't think about this, like, centering of sexual relationships is not the key thing for my polyamory. I've had a long-term serious relationships, let's say, because within that culture it would have been seen as very serious, but obviously I'm not with them anymore, for example. But, like, that wouldn't have involved any sexual contact. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's fascinating, like you said, too, that and it's maybe not that the people in these other cultures or other countries don't want to do that. It's that they may not even know about it, right? It's not even a thing that happens in their community or their village or wherever they are. It's a totally foreign concept. And so having to broach that concept is...
Condoms are pretty ubiquitous everywhere I've been.
Sure.
But things like getting, like, for example, syphilis is very widespread in Madagascar, but I don't think I've ever had a conversation about syphilis in the UK. So, like, obviously, I can get a HIV test for, like, literally no money at all in Malawi, but, like, it would cost me literally hundreds of dollars in the States. So it's not always that the places that I've been stationed that might be considered to have less access actually do.
Right.
I think more often than not, it's the access to the ways to have those conversations might be missing, or like the specific method or contraception that I want to talk about might be missing. Like, I mean, basically I'm coming into a relationship and being like, I need to describe this thing to you. And in some cultures it's going to work, and in some cultures it's going to be more difficult, but it's a conversation we need to have.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating.
No, it is. And I think it's really helpful for other people to hear too.
So I have a question on the lighter side of things, because
it's a heavy conversation.
Because, so we've just come off of roughly a year of traveling, and we know the hilarity of mistakes that we can make just in communication, talking with people. I imagine that maybe gets taken to a new level when you start introducing relationships and sex and all these different things. And I guess, is there a standout maybe blooper that was sort of like something that happened that you're like, only while I'm here doing this thing that I'm doing, like, just, I don't know. I know we've had enough on our own that didn't involve sex or relationships while traveling. Can
you think of one?
I can think of one almost every day.
Where did yours happen? Where did your blooper happen?
Oh, geez. Traveling bloopers? I mean, not translating signs properly.
Yeah, the big
not understanding traffic patterns.
A lot of it involved,
so many
navigating
things.
Traffic and signs in other languages.
Yeah.
Hammock.
Oh yeah, we were trying to find a hammock.
No.
We were trying to find basil.
We were trying to find basil.
And the Spanish word for basil is albahaca or albahaca.
Albahaca.
And it sounds very similar to hamaca, which is hammock.
We went on this whole goose chase for what we thought was basil, and it turned out that they were really telling us how to find hammocks. It was pretty funny.
Did you buy a hammock?
Not
that time. So you did leave with a hammock. That's the important thing.
We did.
Okay. I'm trying to think of one that's similarly lighthearted and fun. Okay, this is a good one. So in Malawi, it would be very strange for women drive and everything, but I just think it's a bit unusual for the woman to drive when there's a man in the car, especially if the man's Malawian. So sometimes I go and pick up my friends or a partner, and I would just naturally get out of the car and get into the car, and he would drive wherever we're going. And it's kind of small. We're a long ways to the capital of Malawi, and it's pretty small. And we would kind of end up going to the same hood a lot of the time. And then later, a completely different situation I was on foot in the market, and I met someone who I would see regularly when we were out driving. And he was like, "Oh, where's your driver?" And I was like, "No, that's my partner." And he was like, "Oh, you can drive?" I was like, "Yeah." And he genuinely just it was a weird exchange. I was like, "Wow, you really just only have this one view of me." And then it was like, "That's your car?" It just became more and more amazing to him that it was I completely misunderstood the situation. That's not that funny, but I hope we can.
No, so they thought your partner was your professional, your hired driver.
Yeah. And also thought that it wasn't my car, it was his company car or something. That was the natural thing. And then he was like, "And you can drive? Oh my god, this is just getting more and more crazy." Yeah.
You're like, "Yeah, I can."
It just really made me realize, how much do we really know about the people we're seeing most days?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and just seeing the world through someone else who grows up in a completely different culture and different language, and it's so vastly different, or it can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't touched on that you were hoping to get out into the world on our podcast versus your podcast?
I think just that, as I said, after my friend kind of pointed out that how many of my relationships I have with monogamous people and then end up leaving them and they're not monogamous anymore, I made a full list of everyone and wrote in their demographics and their age, and I'm now using that as the basis of a data set. And the title is something like how statement of polyamorous intent and identity influences early stage relationship forming. But the issue is that my data set is like so ridiculously diverse that I'm having trouble pulling anything out of it. Like the only thing I can pull out at the moment with any shred of like dignity is that there is like an age bracket that seems to be more likely to be exposed to polyamory and then take it from there into their own life. So I think the other thing I really want to talk about is that is super interesting research, because I think it'd be very helpful to have a more diverse idea of how to have that discussion. I mean, a lot of the literature that's about opening a relationship presumes a pre-existing dyad, which is probably heterosexual, maybe gay men, and they are discussing on equal footings with like all of the economic power that couple has to expand their relationship. And I think what might be missing from that is like, how do you, if you're solo poly, have that conversation in a way that is like safe, sane, and respectful? Mm-hmm. So I'm working on that, and so far it's been very interesting, and I'm now expanding my data set.
And so it's just a self-published paper you're just writing. It's not like through a university or anything?
Not yet, no. I have some, I don't want to jinx anything. I have some leads, but okay. It's something that I'm putting together off my own back for now.
Yeah.
And as a lot of the published research began as, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I'm like in the process of kind of writing like a survey for other people, and especially if people are interested in being key informant interviews, it would be very handy. So it's specifically looking for solo poly people that are living single but polyamorously.
Yeah.
And I think that this would be really great. I would be really excited to do it, and I clearly can't pull from my own background because it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, so you're going to send us the link for the survey, correct? In a way for people to contact you, so anyone who's listening and wants to help out in any way can reach out to you. Is that?
Yeah, and if they don't feel comfortable going through you guys, they can just follow you on Instagram. Probably it's not super formal yet, so.
Yeah, well, we'll put the information in the show notes so they can go directly to you, and they don't have to talk to us at all. I was going to say though, I think it's fascinating that your own data, your data set that you've established within your own life is so diverse that you can't really do the research off of it. Like, I think that's fascinating. and I think it's fascinating that I think it's a good sign, right? That it's such a diverse crowd of people out there who are exploring this, that it's not like, oh, it's all middle class white people from the Midwest or something to that effect. It's just there's people all over the world doing this in all different ways, and I like that.
I mean, also, like, across the gender spectrum as well has been, like, I would love to, I mean, obviously all the demographics are interesting, but I have a sneaking suspicion that straight people are not the people that are poly solo the most.
Right.
There's just a hunch, but that's my hunch. And I'm also thinking, so I'm disabled. I'm deaf in one ear, not like heavily disabled or physically disabled, but disabled. And I would be interested in, like, seeing if there is like a subset of the community that's like hearing impaired, or specifically hearing impaired for my own use. But also it got me thinking, like, I don't think I've ever read a paper that was talking about the way that disability interacts with the polyamorous lifestyle. I mean, you'd think that it would be like a positive interaction, right? Because I think people that are polyamorous actively, they tend to be talking a lot about like consent and boundaries and how to like physically make things happen. I mean, even if you just think about the logistics of like a threesome, I mean, like, you know, people tend to be like really committed to making sure that things get done.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hope that it would be like a super positive interaction, but I've like yet to meet another disabled solo poly person.
Well, let's see if we can change it.
Yeah. The call out. If you're interested in helping out, definitely reach out.
And so I mean, unless there's something else major, Claire, maybe we we let you go. I know it's a little later on your end of the planet than ours, and
yeah, it's 9:15.
So we can let you
past my bedtime.
Right? Well, we'll let you get to bed, and we will be in touch, and we'll get all the information up so people can contact you in the show notes, and we'll be in touch, and maybe we do it again.
Yeah, well, and thank you so much for reaching out. I think that the whole point of our podcast, wanting to start this podcast, was to talk to a diverse range of people, and I feel like we got that from talking to you. Like, that's what we wanted, to get different perspectives that we just don't have the experience. So thank you.
And it only happens when people do reach out. So,
right.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for getting to chat with me. It was so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a hunch it won't be the last time. So
I feel like you say that to every guest.
Yeah, but we're starting to make it happen now. We're on the coming back around loop. So
yeah, keep me in your roster. I think it'll be fun.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye. And we're back.
We are back. Thank you to Claire for taking the time to talk with us, and for coming on the show, and hopefully for coming on the show again in the future.
Yeah, we had a really fun time talking to her, and since we actually travel a lot too, we felt like we really could relate to some of what she talked about. So
at the top of the show, we mentioned there was some information from co-creation that needed to be shared. So really quick, we will share that time-sensitive information. We will let them tell you what they need to say.
Yeah, right now.
Awesome. Great. So thank you so much. My name is Co-Creation. That's K-O-E Creation. And you can find me online. My tag is @CoCreate. That's K-O-E-C-R-E-A-T-E. And at cocreation.com. My book is called This Heart Holds Many. It is available on Amazon for under $20. It has an ebook and a paperback. And if you are going to be in Portland, Atlanta, Austin, or Albuquerque in the next month, I am going to all of those places. I will also be seeing you fine folks at Atlanta Poly Weekend. So excited. I'll be teaching and doing signings there. So all this information can be found at cocreation.com and online. So thank you.
And thank you.
Yes.
It was like we had to break, but no one heard it.
No one heard it. And their interview will be published later this summer, so be on the lookout for that too.
Yeah, it was an awesome interview, so thank you to them for that. And what do we got?
Next week, Donna and Alex. 2 listeners reach out to us via email. Awesome people.
Yeah, they're awesome. Their story is one of fun for the ages.
Yes.
I don't know. What do you say? I don't want to give away too much.
You said the Florida joke last time.
I know. This is the second time we recorded this intro outro because we had a goof up.
Yeah.
And we made some jokes about them moving. Basically, here's what happened. He said in the interview they moved to Florida because they didn't like being cold, but when they moved there, they refused to move in to anywhere that was gated and had old people because they didn't want to seem like they were old. So they're basically doing the retiree thing. They're still working, and they just don't want to be old, so they moved in with a whole bunch of young people, and now they're swinging.
They got sick of winter, so they moved south. That was the basis.
I'm
they're
sick
still
of winter,
working.
too. It's fucking June, and it's still winter. Why we have a fucking fire burning because it's so cold. Damn it. All right. Enough of your negativity. Let's go.
You need to be more positive.
We'll see you in Atlanta, or we will see you
next week.
Ciao.
Bye, everyone.